Well, hello, angry Albertans, if there's any of you left out there. Everybody's partying today. Everybody's celebrating. Oh, we got so much to pat ourselves on the back for, right? Right? I mean, Trudeau backed down on his state of emergency only because it was blatantly obvious that the Senate was going to shut it down for him. Thank goodness. Doesn't mean anything, though. Because they, from what I understand, these changes to FinTrack will be permanent. So, this changes fundraising and GoFundMe and Give, Send, Go and all, and even cryptocurrency forever. So I don't know if that's really a win. I mean, I think that was the only reason they actually wanted to enact that state of emergency anyways, was to take that financial control. Why would they want to do that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Everybody's patting themselves on the back, and I know, thank goodness this audience is a little bit more up to speed than the rest of the freedom movement. Because I see all these newcomers to the movement. They're just elated. Man, they went out to 3 or 4 protests, and wow, we fixed it. And it's like, I remember when I used to be that naive. Those were the days. I remember back in April of 2020, going to my first protest ever in my life. And it was a great protest. And I thought, yeah, just a few weeks of protesting, we'll have this nipped in the bud. Everything will go back to normal. And you know what? That was naive. That was so naive, considering I already knew. I had already been looking up, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. I had never even heard of the Great Reset by that point. But everybody's talking about the Great Reset now. Everybody's focused on the WEF. Oh, Kenny, he's associated with the WEF, and Chrystia Freeland practically runs the place. Her job as finance minister. That's just a part-time gig compared to her dedication to Klaus Anal Swab. You're being distracted. You're being distracted by the WF. You're being distracted by all these convoy stories. Oh, supposedly, Tamara, the convoy organizer, all sorts of stories are flying around that she's been found dead in her jail cell. None of that has been proven. There is not a single reliable source for that. So if you're sharing that disinformation, you're not helping anybody. I mean, when we see it from a credible source, then maybe I'll believe it, but I'm not believing it now. Interesting, though, Tamara got arrested, Pat King got arrested, Freedom George got arrested. BJ Dichter's still out on the loose. He got over $1 million sent to his crypto address. All of that was shuffled out of that wallet and sent to other places. So I don't know if Chrystia Freeland managed to get her hands on that or not. Doesn't sound like it. He's still free as a bird. Who was the big trucker guy? Chris, Big Red, whatever his name. It's funny, he was released the next day. But yet Tamara and Pat and Freedom George, they're all still in prison. Why was the one guy released? Why was Trudeau's sniper, Corporal Bulford, why was he let go the same day only to rejoin the protest hours later? I don't really understand the discrepancies here. Is Corporal Bulford, is he like a Fed? Does he get special treatment or something? Is this because, he might be some kind of infiltrator? I don't know. Just asking. I'm not saying he is or isn't. Just asking the question. I know people are going to get all uppity. How dare you question our beloved organizers? And you'll notice my voice sounds a little better this week. My whole family, all 6 of us, have survived Omicron. And honestly, yeah, it's just a bad cold. It's a terrible cold. And it seems like everybody's getting it. I mean, everywhere I go, people are hacking and sneezing. And it's just like the good old days. But yeah, all 4 kids got it. It hit them harder than it hit us. But they were fine. No major issues. Lots of whining, lots of Kleenex. You can imagine how many boxes of Kleenex a sick family of 6 goes through. But yeah, I mean, Omicron seems to me to be panning out to be exactly what everybody said it was going to be. This is nature's way to achieve herd immunity. Everybody's going to get it if you haven't gotten it already, and then you'll be immune for a period of time. How long? We don't really know, but hopefully that continues. They'll have to come up with a new bioweapon to unleash to scare us into compliance again. So I wish I was better organized at this whole podcasting business, but my problem is that my ideas come to me usually right before the show, so they kind of get thrown together. So if you're out there watching this and you're inspired and you want to do a better production of what I'm about to talk about, please do that, because somebody could make a cool presentation out of this. Those of you who've been following me on Telegram tonight already know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. And on Facebook today, I already posted about how the vaccination goals have been baked into Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 for years. I mean, Agenda 2030 was signed into law, or not law, but signed by everybody, including Stephen Harper, in 2015. I can't remember when Agenda 21 was signed. But those goals include basically 100% vaccination rate. So, I know people are excited because the University of Alberta has backed down on their vaccine mandate. The University of Calgary has backed down on their vaccine mandate. I'm hoping the city of Edmonton is going to back down on their vaccine mandate. I hope all of these businesses and employers back down on these mandates. But my fear is that it is only going to be temporary, because this has been set into stone by the United Nations, not the WEF, for a very, very long time now. They want everybody to have every applicable vaccine shot into their body with 100% compliance. That is the goal. So, I would consider this a temporary reprieve. People need to get organized. We need to stop throwing freedom parties and start actually putting our noses to the grindstone. I'm just looking at the protests that are going on these last few days, and all I see is a party. All I see is just a bunch of, pardon the phrase, but shit disturbers. Next Saturday here in Edmonton, they're going to be bringing jerry cans, and they're going to be drumming on jerry cans, because that's what we do at protests. It's not about getting a message across or anything like that. It's just about annoying as much of the community as you possibly can, apparently. Please explain to me how driving a wedge between the people we need on our side but aren't here yet and us is going to help this cause. Because all you're doing is alienating this side from everybody else. So the time for partying, it was never there. If you're protesting, your protest shouldn't be parties. They shouldn't look like raves. Frankly, if you're going to protest, we're past the bouncy castle thing. That was cute once. It's time to get our noses down to the grindstone. And this is why. Let me see if I can pull this up for you here. So you can follow along at home, globalgoals.com.org. Let me look it up here. Everybody should. Yeah, globalgoals.org. I put the link on the description for the live stream. And that will take you to this United Nations website. Everybody's focused on the WEF. That's being planted. That's the powers that be saying, hey, look over here. Look at what a freak Klaus Schwab is. And the crazy thing about, and this is, I just realized this the other day, because everybody, when they think about Klaus Schwab, and I wish I was skilled enough to just pull up the photo for you right now, but everybody thinks of Klaus Schwab and they picture that guy in like the really creepy bathing suit on the beach. That's basically like the only thing his bathing suit is covering is his actual pecker. That's not even Klaus Schwab. That's Max Schwab of Key West, Florida. And he's a freak show. as are most of the people in Key West, Florida. I've been there. I know. Um, if you haven't been to Key West, you wouldn't know. But people who live in Key West are freaky people. They're a lot of fun, but, it's a good place to party. I mean, if that's all you want to do, go to Key West. I mean, but normally those types of things would get flagged by Facebook as false information. But no, that's just allowed to circulate freely, even though that's not actually a picture of Klaus Schwab. So they want your attention on the WEF. That's where they want you to look. The reality is that there's a whole bunch of powerful organizations with very powerful members that meet every year, and that's where the marching orders for your town councilor, for your mayor, for your city managers, for your MLAs, your MPs, and all your bureaucrats. That's where they get their marching orders. They don't come up with this stuff themselves. Like I mentioned, Vision Zero. Edmonton and Calgary have both joined on to Vision Zero, this plan to reduce traffic deaths to zero. We're going to get into that tonight. That's actually traces back to the Sustainable Development Goals. And essentially, the Sustainable Development Goals are very similar to Klaus Schwab's goals of own nothing and be happy. But they just don't want you focusing on where the blame should actually be placed for this. Because unlike the WEF, these Sustainable Development Goals have already been ratified by your government. So like I said, Stephen Harper signed us on to Agenda 2030 in 2015. COVID-19 and the government reaction to it was just a means to jumpstart the process of taking us into these Sustainable Development Goals. So, the powers that be are distracting us by any means possible. They're giving you fake protesters. They're giving you fake protests. They're giving you fake organizers. They're directing your attention to places where it's completely useless and fruitless. And if we continue on down this road, you will own nothing and be happy no matter how hard you party in Capitol Plaza. Okay, so anyway, let's get into these. Whoop, we played that last week. There we go. Too many buttons. How am I going to do this here? Okay, let me just figure out where I want to start. Okay, so on Telegram, I started on target 4.7. So let me just go to quality education. Oh, this sounds lovely. Who doesn't want a quality education? Oh, that's just great. Everybody wants a quality education. So we'll scroll down a little bit. It actually looks a lot better on the mobile site. I wish I could have brought that up. So the first point I want to draw your attention to is target 4.7. Well, that's this one. So by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Okay. So if I were to translate that into English, this is what it comes out as. Your child's education will be nothing more than an indoctrination into slavery. Not that it already hasn't. Keep in mind, these goals were adopted in 2015. These were approved by none other than Stephen Harper. And like, if you still think that Pierre Poilievre is going to save you, he's signed on to this crap too. But he doesn't talk about it, right? What else do I have here? Oh, okay. Oh, wow, I got all out of order. That's okay. So let's go. Why did I ever get out of order? Oh, podcasting is hard. Okay, so. Actually, sorry, I'm confused. I am very confused. Okay, 4.6. There we go. Oh, eliminate all discrimination. Oh, wow. There we go. Actually, 4.5. I did my screenshot wrong. So we're going to eliminate all discrimination in education. By 2030, eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, and children in vulnerable situations. That sounds so nice. You're going to find out that all of these things sound really nice. They sound like they're a good thing. But look at it in a different light. So here's my translation. Ethnic disparities in education will be eliminated. Jews and Asians will be forced to dumb down their IQs to fit the global agenda. Right? This is about, we want equal outcomes. We don't want equal opportunity. We want equal outcomes. And you notice this vocational training will come up a few times here. Yeah, okay, so we did 4.7. Okay, let's look at a few more of these here. Let's move on to. Oh yeah, this one's bugged me for ages. Vision Zero has really bugged me. Vision Zero is this plan out of Europe that Edmonton signed on to reduce traffic deaths to zero. And if, like I say, you got to translate this stuff into English. How do you reduce traffic deaths to zero? Nobody drives. That's how. That's how you reduce traffic deaths to zero. Okay, so let's go to point 3.6. And what do we have here? Oh, reduce road injuries and deaths. By 2020, halve the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. You know, and of course, Vision Zero takes that to the next step of zero fatalities, right? If you go look up Vision Zero, you will see that anywhere where a vehicle could possibly interface with pedestrians, that vehicle must be driven at a speed where the collision between a pedestrian and a vehicle would be survivable. So that's why Edmonton and the surrounding areas have reduced their speed limits down to 40 kilometers per hour. This is why you can no longer turn left on a green light anymore, because you might possibly run over a pedestrian, right? And this will continue until basically driving is just not feasible for the average person. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? Okay, let's take a look at target 3.7. Universal access to sexual and reproductive care, family planning, and education. By 2030, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including for family planning, information, and education, and the integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. So the translation of that is that by 2030, worldwide access to free abortions will be a human right. You know, so here we don't even have the right to peacefully protest or peacefully assemble or attend our churches or pastor a church, but by 2030, abortion will be a universal human right. Boy, we've got our priorities screwed right up. I don't know about you. I know some people are in favor of abortion, you know, and I'm not here to debate that point. But I think we should probably find some other priorities. Okay, onwards and forwards. And you should read all of these and dissect them. So, no poverty. Now, this one's interesting. Again, it sounds so wonderful. Who wants poverty? Nobody wants poverty. These sustainable development goals are awesome. Everybody should be thrilled. Okay, so target 1.1. By 2030, we're going to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. Well, where are we going to get that money from? I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos won't lift a finger to reduce poverty anywhere. Jeff Bezos seems to think it's just fine, basically paying minimum wages and working them to the bone. Terrible working conditions, people having to pee in bottles because they get penalized for taking a break. And they are making way more than $1.25 a day. So if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos won't reduce poverty, the UN's going to do it. And all of your sold out politicians will simply take away your money to eliminate the poverty of those who are making less than $1.25 a day. So they're not really raising up the poor. They're just stealing from the not so poor and funneling it over to the poor, to level the playing field. And this is what I've been saying for years. These people don't want to bring the third world out of poverty. They want to bring the first world down to the third world, right? Because you're all consuming too much. You're all using too many resources. We can't raise everybody up to first world status, according to these clowns, when in reality we could, but that would require a real education for those people, not just vocational training, right? That would require actual academic work. But they're not going to get that. They're not going to get that, though. I mean, and we'll talk about that, too, because it's all about vocational training and, basically just basic literacy, basic numeracy. Can you count your fingers and toes? They don't want you to be smart enough to overthrow your masters. They just want you to have some food in your belly and to be stupid enough so that you won't realize what a total slave you are, is what it comes down to. Right? And then we look over at Target 1.2. By 2030, reduce it at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definitions. Well, I don't know. I'd have to say Justin Trudeau's failed on that account because COVID has thrown a lot of people into poverty. But like I say, their definition of poverty is more along the lines of, $1.25 a day. So I guess, according to UN standards, I guess Trudeau is, we're still too wealthy. We got a long ways down to go. How communitarian. Such lovely people. Okay, point 1.3. Implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030, achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. So this is the welfare state. So this is where your guaranteed basic income comes in. This is sounding a lot like you'll own nothing and be happy. But don't worry about it because your poverty will have a legislated floor. You're not going to be completely broke. You'll get at least your $1.25 a day, right? They're actually going to legislate how poor you're allowed to be. Okay, that's cool, I guess. Don't worry about them taking all of your money, though. Your poverty will have a floor. Target 1.4. Equal rights to ownership, basic services, technology, and economic resources. Whoa. Ooh. So I'm going to go check Lenin's tomb. I think he might have a hard-on. By 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. Equal rights to economic resources. That sounds like everybody's going to be paid the same, or not at all, right? That sounds like something that Chairman Mao would be interested in, or Vladimir Lenin, or Mr. Joseph Stalin. That seems like that would be right up their alley. This is nothing like the world you and I grew up in. Okay, let's try a different chapter here. These targets suck. Let's try different ones. Let's try, did we already do education? I can't even remember. Okay, so point 4.4. Increase the number of people with relevant skills for financial success. By 2030, substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills, for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. Really? That doesn't sound like higher education. That sounds like trade school. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with trade school. I have a trade. It's great. I love it. More people should have trades. Trades are a great thing to have when going gets tough because you can barter with trade skills. If the poop hits the fan, the last person I would want to be is a university professor. But, focusing on relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, that's a pretty low bar. That's a very low bar. Screw higher learning. You will be given relevant skills and vocational skills to ensure that your offspring will never be knowledgeable enough to defeat their masters. That's what that is. They don't want you smart. They want you useful. You're just a cog in a machine. You're replaceable. We just need to train somebody with your skills. You're just a number. You're useless. You're just an anonymous citizen in the global community. Fun. Super fun. Target 4.6. Actually 4.5. Eliminate gender disparities in education. Ensure, okay, we already covered that. They want you all to come out of the education system the same, right? They don't want, this is not about free thinking anymore. This isn't about critical thinking. This isn't about being a leader, being an entrepreneur. This is about leveling the playing field, dumbing everybody down to the same place so that nobody rises above anybody else. This is what Chairman Mao was all about. This is why Chairman Mao made everybody wear the same clothes and have the same haircut. Right? This is the age-old story, yet your conservative politicians and all of the politicians that have been in power for the last 40, 50 years, they signed you up for this. So if you think that Pierre Poilievre is going to be the savior of the universe when he has never spoken out against these goals once, not that I've seen, I think you got another thing coming. So, and then, of course, this one, education for sustainable development and global citizenship. This is the global indoctrination into slavery. Your child's education will be nothing more than an induction into slavery. They want you to have a slave mindset. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't want you reading history. I mean, why else? Like, why did they get rid of cursive, right? They don't teach handwriting in schools. That's to prevent you from learning your history. You can't read the original Declaration of Independence if you can't read cursive. You can't read. There's a whole bunch of things you can't read in history if you can't read cursive. This stuff's been going on forever. It's been going on for a long time. And they've just been distracting you from it all the time. Just keep looking the other way. They wave one hand and get you to look over there while they're totally screwing you over with the other hand. Okay, let's go to, you got your affordable and clean energy. If you're seeing these themes here, this should be starting to click for you, right? Everything that comes out of the politicians' mouths these days is directly related to these sustainable development goals, right? This is where you get this green revolution idea. It wasn't Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez that came up with the green revolution. It's been on paper at the UN since 2015, right? Like I say, Stephen Harper signed you up for this. You think it's Trudeau forcing you to go into an electric car? You think it's Trudeau forcing you to remove your natural gas stove and your wood-burning fireplace and, this, that, and the other thing? It's real easy to point the finger at Trudeau. But you can thank Stephen Harper, whom I voted for. And I'm sure a bunch of you did. But you know what? I'm past partisan politics now. Now, I'm a political atheist because all of these people are absolute bastards. They're all screwing you. Okay, so what do we want to look at here? It's like 7.4. Promote access to research, technology, and investments in clean energy. By 2030, enhance international cooperation to facilitate access to clean energy research and technology, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, and advanced and cleaner fossil fuel technology, and promote investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technology. Well, that sounds nice. Basically, what they're saying is, they will take your money and waste it on useless green projects and literally leave your family out in the cold. I know they're saying that, they always have to hide it, right? They're saying that, they want advanced and cleaner fossil fuel technology. Well, they're not going to let you have it because it apparently doesn't exist yet. So that's why they got to push the solar and the wind and the tidal and all this crap. Like, you want to know why your electricity bills and your gas bills have gone through the roof? You can thank Rachel Notley for most of that, right? She wanted to build solar farms and wind turbines, and none of this crap works. None of it works. It's terrible. And it's terrible for the environment. Who here, I say who here as if you're going to respond, but who saw the stories about how the tips of these wind turbine blades, since they are so long, the tips of those turbine blades can actually basically create a sonic shockwave that will just instantly kill birds dead if they get too close. They don't have to be contacted with the blade. They just have to be near that shockwave, and the concussion kills the birds. They're finding all sorts of endangered birds dead underneath these wind turbines. And, we're supposed to care about these birds. We're supposed to care about the environment and, sustainable. This doesn't sound sustainable at all, especially when you think about the reality that carbon dioxide is essentially plant fertilizer. So in periods on the earth when we've had higher levels of carbon dioxide, we had higher levels of plant growth, right? You don't have to add as much fertilizer to things. And all the pot growers, they already know this. Like the pot growers, they actually pump in carbon dioxide into their grow rooms to boost the growth of the plants. But hey, I guess junior high science class, like I said, it's just going to be vocational training. They don't want you thinking. Your children in schools right now, they're not learning how to think. They're learning how to do what they're told and to fit in. That's all they're doing. It's all social justice and critical race theory and environmental, just so they can criticize their parents for, putting the garbage in the wrong bin. So gross. Okay. Onwards and forwards. Target 8. Oh, I love this. Decent work and economic growth. Decent work. That's an odd word. It's decent. Like, is decent something you get excited about? Yeah, I got a decent job. I get my $1.25 a day. We're going to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. And Merry Christmas. Okay, target 8.3. We're going to promote policies to support job creation and growing enterprises. Promote development-oriented policies that support productive activities, decent job creation, entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation, and encourage the formalization and growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, including through access to financial services. Okay, let me spell this out for you right now, because this one is completely built on a lie. No government, whether global, local, federal, provincial, has ever created a job. Ever. Government only has the power to destroy. They never have had the power to create. The only people capable of creating jobs are you and me, not Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney has never created a job. Justin Trudeau has never created a job. And people will say, oh, but they hire government workers, don't they? Yeah, they do, at the expense of the private sector. So for every public sector worker, they have to steal from thousands of private sector workers. How many more private sector workers would there be if the government weren't stealing the money? Because we know how much the government likes to waste along the way, right? And again, it's just decent jobs. They don't want to promise you good jobs. They won't even go that far. Won't even use the word good. Just decent. It's decent. And I know they use the word entrepreneur in there, but they don't want entrepreneurs. Your jobs are going to come from state-sanctioned employers, like Foxconn, right? It's going to be the Chinese model, right? Because when you really dig into Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, what you realize is that everything is centrally controlled. Entrepreneurship, they're just paying, that's just an empty platitude. They're just putting that in there so you don't panic. It's a centrally controlled economy. So you're not going to live in the country. They will force you out of the rural areas and into the urban centers. Only mega farmers will be allowed in the country. And really, it won't take very many of them because it's all going to be robotic anyway. But this is the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games was predictive programming. They always got to just kind of, open your mind to the possibility that this is what they're doing. So it's not such a shock when it actually happens. This next one. We're going to improve, whoops, didn't mean to slide that around on you here. Improve progressively through 2030 global resource efficiency in consumption and production, and endeavor to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation in accordance with the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production with developed countries taking the lead. This one is directly taking a swipe at Canada. The only thing keeping Canada afloat right now is our resources. Right? Because other than our natural resources, all Canada has is a service-based economy. Who remembers the introduction of that term, a decade ago? A service-based economy. We're going to have an economy built on piano tuners and yoga instructors and hairstylists. Oh, and some doctors and chiropractors and naturopaths. And they were just going to buy all our stuff from China because that's how an economy works. And you wonder why the debt's out of control. Because we don't produce anything. Who remembers back in social studies class, was it mercantilism? Where all the raw goods from North America had to be shipped back to England, where they would be turned into furniture or fur coats or jewelry. The colonialists were not allowed to sell their own goods on the open market, right? It was the resources got shipped back to England and the approved corporations, and then the colonists were forced to buy that crap back in finished form. I mean, the Americans saw through that, fought a war over it. But history always repeats itself. But that sustainable development goal that we just read there, Target 8.4, is directly targeting the last leg that's keeping our Canadian economy afloat. So they've already attacked the oil and gas. They're trying to shut that down as hard as they can. But Target 8.4 means they're going to go after the lumber. They're going to go after the mining, whether it's potash or metals or whatever, right? We're going to take the profit motive out of natural resources. So that means Canada loses, right? Okay, now we're going to go over to Target 8.5. Full employment and decent work with equal pay. Wait a minute. Full employment and decent work with equal pay? Okay, now they just gave Chairman Mao a hard-on in his grave. Okay? Full employment and decent work with equal pay. This is straight-up communism. By 20, and we're talking, these goals are for the world. This isn't for Canada. This is for the entire world. The entire world is expected to meet these goals. By 2030, we're going to have full and productive employment, and again, here's that word, decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities, and equal pay for work of equal value. Yeah. I have a feeling that they're just going to say all work is equal value because they're pushing communism here. That's what this is. And I find it ironic, you look below here, Target 8.7, end modern slavery, trafficking, and child labor. Like, seriously? How many times has the UN been caught in child trafficking? So here you've got your biggest child traffickers claiming they're going to end child trafficking. And your biggest, these clowns are trying to set up the biggest slave state ever imagined, and they're going to do it on a platform of ending modern slavery and giving you a decent job. Oh, barf. Barf, barf, barf. Oh, you'll like this next one. We're gonna go to goal 16. Peace, justice, and strong institutions and high vibrations, baby. Peace, love, and unity. Yeah. just raise. Oh, man, my vibe is raising already. I love this. Who doesn't want peace, justice, and strong institutions? We're going to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Oh, wow, that sounds like a whole poop load of government. Okay, all right. So most of the people watching this are in the Texas of Canada, Albertistan. What's the first goal? First goal. We're going to reduce violence everywhere. Yeah. Significantly reduce all forms of violence and related death rates everywhere. They gonna take your guns. Why do you think Trudeau's so uppity on the guns? Right? And you know what? You vote in a conservative, you watch. The conservatives are going to come after your guns. Why? Because they signed you up for this. You know, so here everybody's blaming Trudeau for these, these various gun bans and this, that, and the other thing. But it was Stephen Harper that signed you up for these sustainable development goals. Are you starting to understand why I'm a political atheist and why we have said for 2 years that there will be no political solution to any of this? Because it's the politicians that put you into this servitude. You can't fix a problem with the same level of insanity that created the problem in the first place. Oh, yeah, I love 16.8. We're going to strengthen the participation in global governance. We're going to broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries in the institutions of global governance. Wait a second. Globalism, that's just a conspiracy theory. You guys are a bunch of cranks. Globalism, what is that? I mean, people have been talking about globalism since the Romans, right? That's like just people trying to, one country trying to dominate the world, blah, blah, that's just conspiracy theory, man. Oh? Global governance is a conspiracy theory. Kind of looks like a conspiracy fact when you see it right here on the UN's website. Strengthen the participation in global governments. Yeah. Okay, well, let's check out 16.9. Okay, what does 16.9 have to say? Oh, we're going to provide universal legal identity. By 2030, provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. Universal legal identity. Universal. Okay, so we've been hearing the rumors this week that the premiers are all backing off on their vaccine mandates just because Justin Trudeau is going to put in a federal one. We haven't confirmed this yet, but these are the rumors. And people have some pretty solid theories as to why this is going to happen. And they're using the justification of, well, there are some states in the world that don't recognize provincial papers. They will only recognize federal papers. So we need a federal vaccine passport so that Canadians can freely travel to those countries, unless they're dirty anti-vaxxers. No. This has nothing to do with COVID vaccines. This has everything to do with providing universal legal identity by 2030. Provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. So people thought that it was an overreach, that the feds had access to some of your healthcare information or this, that. Yeah, no, now it's going to go straight to the UN. Awesome. Every aspect of your life It's going to be managed by the UN. Why even have local governments anymore? Why even have a mayor? And I mean, we're already at that point, like I opened this stream with. Your mayor, your city manager, your councilors, your high-level bureaucrats, your ministers, your MLAs, your MPs, they're going to the Bilderberg conferences. They're going to Davos. They're going to the WEF. They're listening to their Trilateral Commission buddies. They're listening to their Committee of 300 buddies. Hillary Clinton, I mean, she was on tape a couple years ago saying, anytime I want to figure out what my next move is going to be, I just walk down the street and I go straight to the Trilateral Commission and they hand me my marching orders. This is out in the open, people. And has been for years. And we've all been asleep. We've all been ignoring it, going, it's never going to happen. This is never going to happen. Well, after the last 2 years, let me tell you, it's happening. It is absolutely happening. And you are watching it accelerate by the moment. Everybody's celebrating. Oh, Trudeau backed out of the state of emergency. Oh, he's losing. The truckers have won. The truckers won nothing. Oh, well, they're easing restrictions. Why do you have to be such a spoil sport? Every one of these leaders announced that they would be easing restrictions before the convoy left. Every one of them. Iceland just dropped all their restrictions, I think, today. All of them. They have none. Zero. No restrictions left. The UK dropped all their restrictions. Australia, that one of the most draconian places on the planet next to Alberta, is dropping their restrictions. Except, unless you're unvaccinated and you want to visit Australia, then you're still going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks. But at least they'll let you in. You just have to quarantine. I mean, that's stupid, unscientific, and brain dead. But the truckers had nothing to do with that. Oh, well, they raised morale and they brought people together. Oh, yeah. Okay, I actually even believed that for a while, because for a while it looked like people were taking off their masks. That was great. But now the problem that we have is that by saying the truckers have won, you are no longer watching the ball. You're not in the game anymore. You're back on the couch like the QAnon people, waiting for the white hats to come and save them. All of these little psyops they throw at you are designed to put you back on the couch. So every time you get a little piece of good news, it was deliberate. That good news was delivered to you by these slave masters. Because, looks like public tension's rising. Let's give them a little convoy. Who's BJ Dichter? This political operative. Who? Dagny Pollock. She worked on the campaign of a guy who just stood up in Parliament and called you a terrorist. She got him elected. And now she's on your side. Why isn't she in prison with Tamara? I haven't heard about Roger Hodkinson's funding being canceled. And Roger, actually, I watched the rally yesterday. His speech was, I think, the only one that actually made any sense. At least he covered the bases and it wasn't just party time. But something stinks to high heaven, folks. And if you think we've won something, you are of no use to this fight. None. Let's go take a look at strengthening. Yeah, this one's spooky. 16B. Strengthen national institutions to prevent violence and combat terrorism and crime. Strengthen relevant national institutions, including through international cooperation for building capacity at all levels, in particular in developing countries, to prevent violence and combat terrorism and crime. Target 16.B. That sounds like exactly what Trudeau just did. It wasn't Trudeau's or Freeland's idea to go after foreign businesses and even nation states to stop the convoy. It's right here in the Sustainable Development Goals. So everybody, we all love pointing the finger at the bully. It's so easy to blame Trudeau for everything. And he makes an excellent scapegoat. That's why they picked him. They're like, oh, a drama teacher. He'll be a complete failure to the people. But he will get everything done that we tell him to. Because he's just a puppet. He's an empty puppet. He just follows his little marching orders. He doesn't write his speeches. Chrystia Freeland doesn't write her speeches. None of these people speak for themselves. They're owned and operated. Just like Canada. Just like every country in the world. You notice how they all went in lockstep, that Rockefeller document. You know, the Rockefellers have been screwing you for way over 100 years. They're the reason your healthcare system is such a mess. They're the reason chiropractors are ridiculed. You know, they're the reason, herbalists, chiropractors, those types of people all used to be on a level playing field with the allopathic doctors around 1920. But the Rockefellers, nope, they took it over. And they did it through their immense oil wealth because they owned Standard Oil. So they took that money and they started buying off the universities. And they said, we're only going to finance your medical department if you only stick to allopathic medicine, a.k.a. pharmaceutical medicine. Anything else has to be shut down or you don't get any money. And so they bought out the whole medicine industry, essentially. They own it. And you see that all the time. That stuff's still going on today, right? Like Saudi Arabia has huge investments in our universities. For their Islamic studies departments. Interesting. Why do we allow foreign investments in our universities? That doesn't seem like a smart idea for survival. But we haven't been paying attention. Nobody's paying any attention to anything. So, just sit back, have a party, just enjoy the unity, right? Because all that matters is unity. And it's funny because I've watched protest movement after protest movement after protest movement over the last several years get destroyed by unity. Look no further than the Yellow Vests. They started off with a bang when they got to Canada. Even I was excited about it. I had family members that were out protesting with the Yellow Vests. But because they wanted unity, that meant that they couldn't be bothered to chase out the soldiers of Odin, or they couldn't be bothered to chase out the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, or the people that shouldn't have been involved, and the people who should have never gotten a hold of the microphone. But they handed them the microphone. And then the whole movement went down in a spectacular crash of, in Edmonton here, it basically ended when they showed up and counter-protested Muslims who were standing at the legislature in a vigil for the Muslims that were killed in a mosque shooting in New Zealand. And rather than pick a new location or go across the square, no, they faced off with them. That didn't look good. Pretty much shut the whole thing down. Who wants to be associated with that, right? So, yeah, you keep bragging about all the unity you're bringing to the movement. I'm just waiting for the fail because it's coming. It's coming. When you clowns think that you should get behind Pat King, who's got stolen valor, ripped people off for tens of thousands of dollars, letting them believe that he was an Afghan war vet who lost his leg in an IED explosion, when in reality he was just drunk and fell off a buddy's roof. You want to follow people like that? You want to follow people, who we've been pointing out the sovereign citizen BS for 2 years, and nobody really understands. Very few people seem to get it. Why? Why do you make such a stink about this sovereign citizen stuff? Well, look no further than Pat King. Pat King's been pushing this all along. He copyrighted Dina Hinshaw's public health orders, just like Chris Sky copyrighted a banking act and claimed he was the finance minister, and Norman Traversy copyrighted the liberal gun ban bill, claiming that he owned it, so now Trudeau couldn't enforce it, right? Kellyanne Wolf copyrighted the Quarantine Act. She copyrighted the Quarantine Act months ago. Every one of these schemes has failed. I don't know why they keep trying to do it. You could copyright anything. Just pay the fee. You could copyright your laser printer. I mean, it's just a database. You pay your fee, you get an entry in the database. That's all it is. Doesn't mean that it only means something if you actually own the work that you're copywriting. If you don't actually own the work, you just wasted $50 and committed fraud. And these are your leaders, right? Kellyanne Wolf, Lamont Diego, Vladislav Slobodislav, they all just were conjured out of thin air right at the beginning of this, ready to go to work, spreading sovereign citizen bullcrap everywhere so that every protest could be flagged with it at a later date. It took them 2 years. But now the media's finally, they kept that in their back pocket for 2 years, waiting for something big enough so that they could smear you all as terrorists. So that they kept Pat King's podcasts in their back pocket for this bail hearing, right? The prosecution literally watched all of Pat King's broadcasts where he's talking about crazy, ridiculous things, all these racist stories and, white genocide and they have just cherry-picked everything out of every one of his live streams to use to paint you as a terrorist. It's not Justin Trudeau. This was staged. This was planned in advance. David and I, we couldn't believe the level of sophistication the sovereign citizens have been demonstrating the last 2 years. We're like, this has to be funded. It has to be getting pushed. And now we're starting to see what the goal was. It was all just to save it for that right moment so that they could turn as many people against you as they could, right? Because all we're doing now is widening the divide. Nobody's trying to talk to each other. All we're doing is honking horns. We're beating jerry cans. We're, just all we're doing is making noise, angering people. No one's trying to close the divide. Nobody's trying to educate anymore. All we're doing is screaming and yelling at each other, and this is going to take us right into the New World Order. They've got you right where they want you. And if we don't change what we're doing, we're screwed. We're completely screwed. And you know what? I know my opinions are not the popular opinions right now, but just wait, because this is all going to blow up in your face. If you still want to support this crap, and you still want to support these loser organizers and their jerry can drumming protests, their little rave dance parties, giving flowers to the police officers while basically creating living hell for anybody that lives in the area, you know what? Knock yourself out. You're just playing right into their hands. Everybody says, what's your solution? Be smarter. Know what's going on. If you knew what was going on, you wouldn't be celebrating right now, and you wouldn't be patting yourself on the back. You'd be fighting still, and you'd be putting on real protests with a real message where you're actually trying to educate people about what's happening. Roger Hodkinson doesn't understand this. None of these people seem to understand this. Chris Scott doesn't understand this. Bob Blowon doesn't understand this. Roger Hodgkinson was on the stage yesterday, and he's like, it's all over. It's all over. All that's left is the hand-wringing. And it's, of course, he's speaking about COVID. COVID may be over, but the agenda continues on. And if you don't realize what the agenda is yet, we're in a whole heap of trouble. It's time to be smart. I put up 2 links tonight. You've got this these Global Goals website, globalgoals.org. In the previous post to this one, I posted up another one. You need to dig into this stuff. You got to understand what the plans are, and you got to understand how ugly it is for you. And you need to learn to translate their pretty language into reality. Because the first time I looked at Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, it's like, well, that doesn't sound so bad. It sounds nice. Yeah, that's because you're not looking at it through the right lens. They want it to sound nice. It's a sales job. You're being sold. You are being sold out. Sent down the creek without a paddle. And that's exactly the way they want it. So, that's all I wanted to say tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week.